Hey there, this is Katie from the Jane team. We are so excited to join you today for the PT on Ice Daily Show. If you haven't had the chance to meet Jane just yet, allow me to introduce you. Jane is an all-in-one practice management software designed to be helpful to you, no matter how or where you practice. With Jane, you can book, schedule, chart, process payments, and run your entire practice online. Come get to know us over at jane.app/physical therapy. And if you're ready to get started, you can also use the promo code ICEPT1MO for a 1-month grace period at the time of sign up. We'll talk to you soon.
All right, we are live. Good morning, folks. My name is Dustin Jones, and you are listening to the PT on Ice Daily Show brought to you by the Institute of Clinical Excellence. Today is Wednesday. That means it's Older Adult Wednesday, where we talk about all things older adults. Either myself, Christina Previtt, Alex Germano, Julie Brower. We got an awesome MMOA team. Today's topic at hand: 2 ways to combat ageism. 2 ways to combat ageism. Before we get into the goods, I do want to mention that MMOA, Modern Management of the Older Adult Essential Foundations, that is our online course. Our next cohort starts tonight at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time this Wednesday. We have 7 spots left at the time of this recording. So if you are wanting to get into that cohort, I would do that sooner than later because that will likely sell out before 8 p.m. tonight. In terms of our live courses, we got a packed 2022. We're super pumped to be getting out on the road to see a lot of y'all this weekend. Christina's going to be up in Fenton, Michigan. We got a few spots left for that. Myself and Jeff Musgrave are doing a private cohort relatively close to there. Then next weekend we have Nashville, which is sold out, so sorry for those that wanted to attend that. And then on the 22nd of January, we're going to have a course in Paoli, Pennsylvania. There's a few spots left there. And then Christina will be on the West Coast for a private course there. So we got a jam-packed January and several months ahead. So 2 ways to combat ageism. Today's topic is really motivated by a CSM panel discussion that I'm going to be part of next month, talking about the UN's Decade of Healthy Aging, this kind of big organizational aspiration to make changes at many different levels of society and within healthcare to really promote healthy aging, and defining that in ways that we can influence that. And so we're going to speak to this at CSM from the physical therapy side of things. And one question that comes up in this conversation is, how can we combat ageism? How can we combat ageism? And I think this is a very important question to ask. We talk about this at the start of our MMOA Essential Foundations as well as our live course, because we feel this is a very important topic for clinicians, students, faculty, researchers to understand, to think about, to reflect on, because it really influences how you may interact with individuals of a certain age. Some of those stereotypes, those perceptions, those biases can influence a lot of our interactions, a lot of our assessments, a lot of our interventions of what we may do or what we may not do. And we need to be very, very aware of that. So I want to give you 2 practical steps, hopefully some things for you to reflect on in ways that you can implement or combat ageism in your own life, in your own circle of influence. So the first one, I think it's very, very important that we all define ageism for what it really is. If you look up the textbook definition of ageism, typically you're going to see some type of definition from Dr. David Butler, who coined the term in 1969, and he coined the term ageism as basically discrimination against someone based on their age. It's basically how you think, feel, and act towards others, but then also yourself. Now that's nice, right? It's kind of all-encompassing, and we can give very practical examples of where you may see this at different levels of society, not just healthcare, but all over the freaking place. But I don't think that hits as hard as a definition that the author Ashton Applewhite has proposed. She is the author of This Chair Rocks, an awesome read, really good TED Talk as well. But she coined ageism, or defined it as discrimination against your future self. Discrimination against your future self. Now, think about this. And I want you to reflect on this. Do you want to live a long life? The vast majority of you all listening or watching on Instagram or on Facebook are probably nodding their head like, yeah, I want to live a long life as long as I can maintain whatever capacity that it is, right? We want to live long. Now, do you want to die slowly or die quickly? Many of us in healthcare, we see this on a daily basis. We kind of see the slow decline and the pain that invokes in that person, everyone around them, the healthcare provider as well. And so for most of us, we want to live long and we want to die quickly or die fast. Live long, die fast. This is probably one of the most universal goals for many individuals. Now, if our goal is to live long and maintain our capacities over time, but we ultimately want to get old, that is a goal for many of us. Yet we consistently discriminate against a group of people that we hope to join someday. We discriminate against our future selves. And when I say discriminate, that can be somewhat of an inflammatory term, right? But it could be the most subtlest of ways that we discriminate. Very obvious ways, but very subtle and often subconscious that you're not even aware of. So regardless of how you perceive older adults, regardless of how ageist you are, you still want to be one. And we need to realize that we are ultimately, when we discriminate against an older adult, we're just discriminating against our future selves, against the people group that we want to join someday, which ultimately makes us all old people in training. This is something that Ashton Applewhite has coined in her book, This Chair Rocks. But we're all old people in training. I think we need to start there. Step one, define ageism for what it really is. It's discrimination against your future self. Is that something that we want to do? So that's number one. Step number two is to know your role. When I say that, is because we have all kinds of people that are going to watch this video and listen to this podcast. We have students, which we're super grateful for you students that take the time out of your busy curriculum and schedule to consume this content and engage with us. We've got clinicians. The majority of our audience are seeing people on a daily basis. We've got folks that are teaching in academic centers, in programs, PT, PTA, OT, CODA programs. We're grateful for them. And then we have researchers as well, which is super exciting to engage with those individuals that are creating a lot of evidence that is supporting a lot of our interventions. Regardless of your role, you have some specific things that I think you can really focus on to help combat ageism in your particular circle of influence. I'm going to start with the students. I think one of the most helpful things at your stage of the game, because most of you all, not all of you, but a lot of you all are relatively young, which is a blessing. You've got the blessing of time. And in that stage of life, it can be very, very helpful to really do some introspective work and check your own biases. Are you ageist? What are some of these perceptions and stereotypes that you have of older individuals, and how do those kind of pan out in terms of how you interact with folks? It will become very clear of how those pan out as you go through your clinical rotations and as you take that first job out of school. You'll start to be very aware of how you may have these certain subtleties towards individuals, whether you get closer and start to talk a little bit louder to them, right? Or you may start to talk a little bit slower. Or you say, oh, Betty is 93 years old. She probably needs a screen TheraBand. This 26-pound kettlebell I got back here is way too much for her. You can be aware of that, especially at a younger age. And so a very helpful tool that you can start to learn about your own biases is the Harvard Implicit Bias Test. Just Google that. I'll drop the link in the Facebook video. But there's one on your implicit bias towards aging. And that will be very, very eye-opening to you. I can almost guarantee it, because as someone that will speak to ageism several times a month, I am ageist. I have an implicit bias discriminating against older adults. So you are not immune to this whatsoever. So I would take that test, do some introspective work, become very aware of some of your biases. That's one. Number two, realize that you are an old person in training. You may be in your mid-20s, 30s, whatever age you are, but you're starting off on this new career. You're really excited. You got a lot of time ahead of you, but ultimately a lot of the decisions that you're making now are going to form the person in the future. And you want to be old. You want to live long and die fast. You want to be an old person, and you are an old person in training right now, which means you have a lot more similarities to a lot of these older adults than what you realize. You are very similar and in the same boat. You all have the same goal of living long and dying fast. Number three, I think this is where you have a very important voice, is that you have the ability to hold your peers accountable, your faculty accountable, your programs accountable, and your CIs accountable. This is what I love about a lot of the students that I've interacted with, is they will call people out on if they are demonstrating certain isms or if they are not practicing at the highest level of their degree. and of their training. And we really value your all's voice. We want to encourage you to continue to hold your peers, faculty, CIs, and your programs accountable. If you see ageism, if you see them not covering older adults in a manner that's respectful, that's dignifying, that really shows the value in this field, that what it deserves, call it out. If you need help, hit me up, or anyone within the MMOA division. And then the last one for the students, I think it's very helpful in this period of time to intentionally seek out time with older individuals. Do not view them as a patient per se, but a person, a human being, that when you spend more time with these individuals, hear their stories, hear their struggles through the healthcare system, how people treat them, what they receive in terms of treatment, or what is withheld from them based on their age, you will start to develop a heart for these individuals and get a sense of what they've been through, which is absolutely terrible, if I'm to be honest. And once you have that perspective, then that can be a lot of motivation for you to change that narrative of ageism that we see all around us. So intentionally seeking out time with older folks. For me, it was spending time in home health, spending 2 to 3 hours a week with individuals, months on end, that gave me a very unique perspective into their lives that I will cherish forever, especially at that period of time in my life. So that's students. Number 2, the majority of you all watching, clinicians. First thing that we want you all to think about are all the things that I mentioned before for the students, right? Checking your own biases. You are an old person in training, holding your peers and colleagues accountable. The big thing that I want you to realize is that you are a Jerry PT. Every single one of y'all watching this. Now, the ICE crowd is predominantly outpatient orthopedics, right? Many of you all, you love a good spinal manipulation. Many of you all like to do a lot of fitnessing. You like to throw a barbell around. Many of you all have dreams of working with athletes and young individuals and very active folks. But in reality, how much of your caseload are older adults? Statistically speaking, if you're working outpatient orthopedics, billing Part B, billing insurance, usually around half of your caseload is going to be an older adult. And so you, my friend, even though you may not want to admit it, are a geriatric clinician. Embrace that title. Now, even if you are working with younger individuals, even if you are a pediatric physical therapist, you are working with a patient that has the dream and goal of living long and dying fast. So you're influencing a person that is ultimately going to become an older adult someday. So even if you're in peds in the school system, I could make a good argument that you are a Jerry PT. Embrace that. Have that perspective. How are you influencing this person going forward? I also think this is very important for clinicians to think about what is driving their clinical care. Is it their assumptions? Is it a date of birth? Or is it an actual assessment? What is driving your interventions, your choices? Why did you choose that green TheraBand versus that green kettlebell or the dumbbell or the heavier resistance of the TheraBand? Why is that? Is it your assumptions leading to that or an actual assessment? Because your assessment is going to be much more informative of what people are actually capable of to be able to match your interventions to that individual, to make it more effective and to ultimately change their lives. Assessments over assumptions. You are also a Jerry PT, whether you like it or not. So, clinicians, you got this. Now, faculty. I think faculty have a huge opportunity here. All the ones I mentioned before, right? Checking your own biases. You are an old person in training. Hold your colleagues and your programs accountable. But you have a very unique ability to get your students excited about working with older adults. And I think many folks that I've talked to is that they may not have the airtime with their students, which is an absolute shame in our current curriculum, but many of them will kind of shift or push the older adult exposure to the clinical rotations. And I think that is a risky game to play. If you're not proactively getting your students excited and showing them the possibilities of working with older adults, and you're thinking, oh, they're going to get this in their clinical rotation when they go through acute care, SNF, or maybe a home health rotation or whatever, that is a risky game that's ultimately probably not going to be the result that you want. Some clinical rotations are awesome, right? Some of you all do your due diligence and you know that this rotation, this site is going to be rock solid and going to really influence this person in a positive manner. But I can speak firsthand, there are a lot of clinical rotation spots that are practicing in kind of that ageist mentality, and these students are getting exposed to that. They need a counter narrative, and that person can be you, and you can influence them tremendously. I think about my most influential faculty member I had, Dr. Ann Harrison, who recently retired from the University of Kentucky. If it wasn't for her and her perspective that I had in the back of my head when I went through my clinical rotations, I would not have the perspective I have now. I had her narrative to be able to combat things that I saw in that clinic that said, hey, that doesn't seem right. Or why did he do this? Or why did she do that when this person can do X, Y, and Z? If it wasn't for Dr. Harrison, I would not have that combating narrative. And you have a huge role to play there. Researchers. Last but not least, researchers. Same ones before, right? Check your own biases. You're an old person in training. Hold your colleagues accountable. There's lots of issues in the area of research related to ageism. Christina Previtt can speak to this really well. She really lives in this area as she's pursuing her PhD. But from my perspective of someone that consumes your literature, your research, is we need more old, not weak-minded researchers. We need more individuals that are going to study interventions or show that people can respond to interventions that are more influenced by someone's ability rather than their date of birth. If you look through so much Jerry PT literature, so many interventions are underdosed, given to a specific person based on their age, not necessarily their ability. When I look at some of the most influential articles that I've consumed and many of the folks that I spend time with, it's been the ones that have ultimately done a quote-unquote risky intervention with a relatively quote-unquote risky population, like the Liftmore trial, for example. The group down in Australia that did some barbell training with individuals that were of a certain age, but also of a certain ability and with a certain medical diagnosis. I think about Neil May in the Bell trial, who took kettlebell training and took people, similar group of people to the Liftmore trial through that particular training. Christina Previtt is another one as she's working on her PhD. These researchers are incredibly valuable to our profession and influencing the minds of the future that ultimately are completely bashing a lot of ageist assumptions that we have. When we see a research article of older adults that are doing barbell lifts at 85% of their 1RM, that really challenges a lot of perceptions, right? And a lot of stereotypes compared to the several dozens, hundreds of articles that we have going through some seated TheraX routine with green TheraBand. We need those old, not weak-minded clinicians. Now, I'm not going to speak to the inclusion criteria issues and what gets published and what doesn't. Christina can speak to that really well. But for the researchers, we need more of you all that have that old, not weak mindset, because what you can produce is very influential and very powerful. All right, man, I've been rambling for solid 17, 18 minutes now. So I appreciate you all that are still watching, that are still listening. But I want you to reflect on kind of your circle of influence. Are you the researcher? Are you the faculty member, the clinician, the student? You may be wearing a couple of those hats. Who are you influencing? What channels do you have? What can you do to really combat ageism? Because I think this is not going to come from some organizational campaign with all these cool graphics and videos and all these social media posts. It's going to come from all of us that are working with individuals that are kind of in the trenches, working with a lot of our colleagues that are putting out material, putting out research that we're teaching the future of our profession. It's going to be individual efforts, combined individual efforts to really change the narrative, definitely within our profession, but then ultimately within society as well. So that's all I got. Appreciate you all. If you have any questions, thoughts, concerns, drop it either on the Instagram video or the Facebook video. We'd love to dialogue about this. If you're wanting to get in MMOA Essential Foundations, 7 spots left at the time of this recording, so that will likely sell it by this evening, so be sure to get on that. Otherwise, we will catch y'all soon. Appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for tuning in to the PT on Ice Daily Show. If you enjoyed this content, head on over to iTunes and leave us a review. And be sure to check us out on Facebook and Instagram at the Institute of Clinical Excellence. If you're interested in getting plugged into more ICE content on a weekly basis while earning CEUs from home, check out our virtual ICE online mentorship program at ptonice.com. While you're there, sign up for our Hump Day Hustling newsletter for a free email every Wednesday morning with our top 5 research articles and social media posts that we think are worth reading. Head over to ptonice.com and scroll to the bottom of the page to sign up.